Dale Earnhardt Jr. is leaving NBC Sports for TNT Sports and Amazon Prime in 2025. So he's joining two Boos in the commentary box. Earnhardt Jr. will serve as an on-air commentator for exclusive coverage on TNT Sports of 5 NASCAR Cup Series races each summer, which will air in consecutive weeks on TNT and B/R Sports and add-on on Max. It also contributed to a new Bleacher Report content series distributed across BR's socials and digital platforms. The new series that will be co-produced with his Dirty Mo media company is expected to capture the thrilling NASCAR experience as he interviews special guests while driving each of TNT's 5 Cup Series tracks with them in the passenger seat. That does sound fun. That's a good idea, actually. Now, Junior said it's such an exciting time to welcome TNT Sports back to NASCAR and called it nostalgic to see them return to the sport and be a part of that team. It is nice to see TNT back, and I hope they do have the same TNT, because we don't get that over here in the UK. All we get is the BT team just going, well, they used to be BT Sports, so we'll see if they get the American coverage for when we have them cover Le Mans in a month's time. Now, along with his TNT Sport duties, Earnhardt Jr. will be on the Prime Video broadcast too. We'll see Prime Video exclusively stream 5 Cup Series races after Fox Sports concludes its coverage, which includes exclusive coverage of practice and qualifying for almost the first half of the Cup Series season, minus the Busch Light Clash, Daytona 500, Daytona Duels, and the All-Star Race. In a statement, Prime Video said they're thrilled to welcome Earnhardt Jr. to the Amazon family and build their NASCAR coverage around him as one of the most beloved figures in racing history. Graphic courtesy there of TNT Sports and Amazon Prime. Who on earth have they been talking to? Yes, he's popular, but I won't go that far. I'd more call his dad one of the most important people in NASCAR history. My goodness me, they do flatter. So, Ben, is the addition of Dale Earnhardt Jr. a good start for the return of NASCAR on TNT? And what about Amazon Prime as they're entering the sport? Go.
Well, first of all, Josh, I think Junior is more universally popular than his dad was. I think people might, it's very easy to romanticize him, and of course, it's a very tragic circumstance in how we lost Dale Earnhardt Sr. But he was booed mercilessly at Bristol when he spun Terry Labonte out. I mean, he certainly had a sizable fan base, but he was not this universally beloved figure. I mean, he certainly had a lot of haters as well. And not that Dale Jr. doesn't, but I think Jr. certainly. I mean, look at how many consecutive most popular driver awards he won. And on that note, I understand that the opinion that I'm about to share it's not even one of my most unpopular opinions. It probably is my most unpopular opinion that I have. I just have never been a huge fan of Dale Earnhardt Jr. in the booth. And it's not that I don't think he's capable of providing good analysis. It's not that I don't think he has a place in the world of media today. Just to give you an example, I was listening to the Dale Jr. download when we got the confirmation that he's going to be on TNT and Prime next year. So I love what he does with his podcast. I think he, is certainly a very important figure in the history of our sport. Certainly in recent years, even now that he's been retired or semi-retired. I guess I know he still comes out from time to time in Xfinity, but I just, for whatever reason, I guess I would say I liked the energy that he brought the first couple of years. It seems it was a fresh change of pace, and obviously, given his popularity and given who he is, I thought, it made sense to have him in such a visible position. But as time has gone on, and I don't know, maybe this is just my personal taste changing as well. I don't know that he's great at reacting in real time. I feel like sometimes it's just more incoherent, loud noises coming from the booth. I think the fact that he's paired with Rick Allen probably doesn't help in that regard. But it's just I don't know that the booth is necessarily the best place for him in a media role if he were to be involved in the second chapter of his career, if you will. So I would like to see, I know they're not going to do this. I know they're going to put him in the booth. They've even said that here. I know, we're still over a year out, but they're already putting in the press releases. We know it's going to happen. He's going to be in the booth next year. I would prefer if he were in a studio-based role on a pre-race show or a post-race show, or what you just mentioned, Josh, with this new series with Bleacher Report, doing bits like that for social media, letting him run wild with his own media company that he's built from the ground up, and being able to do so with the support and the budget of a major network like Turner, a major streaming service like Prime, just as NBC was able to offer him that support as well for the last several years. I think all of that's great. I don't think the booth is the best place for him. And again, I'm well aware, but that's an unpopular opinion. I know a lot of people love him, and to answer the question here, I think it is a good start because enough people like him in the booth that I think it's going to be a popular move. It's just for me and my personal tastes. And, I know Matthew Owens was watching the start. I don't know if he's still in the chat room, but I know he certainly feels a similar way. Maybe if you get Alan Bestwick in there, that might help. I think Adam left a comment there in the chat as well. I think the importance of a play-by-play man, that you have good chemistry with is very much an important part of this. But again, maybe that's part of it too. NBC has tried different things, and credit to them for, thinking outside the box a little bit. But again, it really kind of bothers me when they put Dale on play-by-play, or they, try those radio style broadcasts with a play-by-play man that's only done play-by-play on television. And you got Mike Bagley there, which is good, but then you go to two driver analysts. And I think that, there's a completely different skill set that's required for play-by-play than there is for color commentary. And again, Dale Earnhardt Jr. being a driver, up until his retirement and only coming into the booth for the last few years here, doesn't have that training and that experience that, somebody like an Alan Bestwick or Rick Allen would have before they work their way up to that position. So, to sum it all up, I'm sure it's going to be a popular move. It makes total sense. I totally get why TNT and Prime want him. And I do think, in a lot of ways, it is a big loss for NBC. I'm just, from my personal vantage point, I would prefer if he were somewhere other than the booth when their coverage comes on next summer. But, again, I don't want to judge too harshly too early. We're still more than a year out. We'll see how it goes. But those are my personal opinions on the whole situation.
It beat me to it. Everything Ben says reminds me of Josh and mine's commentary, shouting and incoherence. That's basically what it is. It works. Josh brings the shouting and me being the incoherent one. I don't know. I don't think it'll work. We've got the double now coming up at Berlin this weekend, so that'll be fine in Formula E. Matthew is here. Says Dale has never been taught properly by a proper play-by-player. Aside from 2 races with Mike Joy, he can be taught if he and the network are willing. I think that's so important as well. Main skill of commentary is knowing what's important, also know when to take a step back and let others in their place. Exactly that, yeah. You've got to know when to talk and when to shut up, basically. So
to be completely fair to Dale here, I think they did him no favors by adding him into the booth and not taking anybody out, and then splitting the booth in half with him and Jeff Burton on one side and Steve Letarte and Rick Allen on the other. Because I think that makes it very difficult for Rick Allen as the play-by-play man to have control over a booth that not only has an additional one extra person than what's traditional in terms of a NASCAR broadcast, at least, but also isn't altogether in the same area. At least it doesn't appear that way with what we see on television here. So again, I think those are very important factors that need to be considered there. But to Matthew's point as well, because Fox rented Dale Jr. for a couple of races, and when he was paired with Mike Joy, I'm going to try to get Matthew on my podcast later this week, because there's a lot that I want to catch up with him about. And this is certainly part of it with these new TV deals coming in, because I know he's very passionate about sports media. I don't, and maybe he'll disagree with me, and we'll get into that conversation next week, hopefully. But I understand that it is certainly important to have a good play-by-play partner for a color analyst in the booth. I don't know that I necessarily noticed much of a difference when, I think it was the Talladega race, at least a couple of years ago, when Junior came into the Fox booth. I don't know that I noticed too much of a difference from what I'm used to hearing from him on NBC. Now, granted, he doesn't have a full half season or whatever, a full year's worth of network broadcasts to work alongside Mike Joy and develop that chemistry. But, again, when you're 6 years into what you're doing and what you've, grown accustomed to with what NBC has coached you to be able to do and not do and whatnot, I don't know how much of that, maybe having a year off will help. We'll see. But I don't know how much of that is unlearnable, so to speak, even if you bring in somebody like an Alan Bestwick, or you get, different coaching on the production side of things. But again, I don't want to make a judgment too harshly either way, because we haven't even seen a full broadcast yet of what this looks like in practice. We don't know who his play-by-play man is going to be. They might try to make him the play-by-play man for a couple races. Who knows what's going to happen? There's so many places that still need to fall into place. This was just the biggest one, I think, that everybody expected, because I think they even said, when he was leaving NBC, that he was going to, he was exchanging it for 2 different partners, and people thought that meant 2 people were joining NBC. In reality, I think it was that
he's going to
2 different networks here with Turner and Prime. But again, I think that I would rather. I have some reservations about using him in the booth, but I do want to see the pieces that they put around him and what it looks like in practice before I make a comment too harshly either way.
Ed brings up a good point with Nikki Shields at the moment on F1 Academy. Another example of someone in a role that plays against their skill set. Nikki, she's a brilliant pit lane reporter and pundit, not the best as play-by-play yet. It definitely shows. That's because she's been put in that position very brand new and has to learn it's a different skill set.
Jamie Little and Vince Welch, in ARCA and NASCAR trucks. I think, again, and even Dr. Jerry Punch to a certain extent. I know a lot of people didn't like Jerry Punch in the booth. I thought he was fine. I certainly preferred him in the pits, but again, I think it is a different skill set, that it's not just as simple as, we need somebody in the booth, let's just call one of our pit reporters. There are certainly exceptional talents, like Alan Bestwood can do both very well, I think, but there are certainly people whose strength is one or the other, and I think you see that in many different individuals and examples in the sport.
After being in Donington, I can safely say I cannot do the pit lane reporter job 24/7. I never walked so much in my life. But it was fun being thrown in there because I was doing 3 jobs: host, commentator, and pit reporter. So that was all right. Matthew says, here's the big problem. The TNT press release said booth talent. That leaves the door open for him to be play-by-play, which would be the biggest possible mistake, is to have him there. Yeah, I mean, if you can have a driver as lead play-by-play, you have to pair him with another good driver, because then it makes sense. Because Martin Brundle, David Coulthard, when they led the commentary on BBC F1 and the world feed in 2011, it was 2 drivers, but Martin had at that point 16 years worth of experience in the commentary box. He'd been working with Murray Walker, James Allen, Jonathan Ledyard. He knew what style of play-by-play he wanted to do and adapted quite quickly. David Coulthard learned off him, and then Ben Edwards, and now he's on with Alex Jakes. But when you've only worked with one other commentator in what hasn't really been a successful partnership, it does bring the question of, is this going to be right? And NBC sort of just threw him around, didn't they? He turned up on NASCAR, so he turned up on IndyCar broadcasts at the 500, and I don't know. It's like when Danica now turns up at Formula One. You go, really? They're there? It doesn't work. So I don't know. I would much rather see him in an analyst role. Why not stick him in an analysis role similar to what we have with Larry Mack? I think that was a role that could suit him quite well.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I get what you're saying, Josh. I didn't have too much of a problem with him going to Indy, because again, it wasn't like, ESPN, ABC tried this. They put Rusty Wallace in the booth for the Indy 500, which again, if Rusty Wallace were going to the, pre-race show for the 500 or just being a part of their coverage in that sense, I think that would have been a better move if they wanted a NASCAR name to maybe bring in some crossover audience. I get putting Dale on the 500, the Indy 500 broadcast, and I appreciate that they didn't take Townsend Bell out of the booth to put him in his place there, because again, those are drivers that actually raced in the series that they're covering. So, again, I know Danica is a polarizing figure as well, but I appreciate that Sky at least doesn't put her in Martin Brundle's position on the commentary in the booth with David Croft. But again, to the point of play-by-play, Fox has tried this with their drivers only broadcasts. And I think, Kevin Harvick's a little bit more out of place there when he's tried to do play-by-play than he is now. I mean, I think he's very popular, and probably the best part of Fox's coverage right now, aside from Mike Joy, is how Kevin Harvick's adapted to the booth this year. But again, I don't know, can you imagine Troy Aikman doing play-by-play instead of Joe Buck, or somebody like JJ Redick doing play-by-play in place of Mike Breen for the NBA or on ESPN or whatever, Charles Barkley doing play-by-play, in place of Kevin Harlan. That's it's not even just a motorsports thing. You very rarely see a lot of ex-athletes get involved in media and in color commentary. Very rarely do you see you know, another sport try that, where they take a former athlete or a former star and, you know, go into play-by-play instead of, you know, some other role there. So again, you know, we've got a lot that still needs to fall into place here. I want to be careful that we're not being, you know, too overreactionary too quickly here. But those are my initial thoughts on it. I think it can be a good move. There's certainly a place for Dale Earnhardt Jr. in NASCAR media today. I just don't know that the booth is his number one strength, and that's why I have some reservations about it that other folks might not have. Hopefully I've made my case as fairly as possible here.